I sat alone at the small wooden table in my apartment, staring at a neat stack of wedding invitations. Each envelope carried more than a date and venue. It carried hope. Hope that this time my parents would show up for me. Growing up, I had always felt like an afterthought in my own family. My older brother was the pride of the house, the achiever, the one my father bragged about to neighbors. My younger sister was the princess, showered with attention, gifts, and affection. And me? I was the quiet middle child who learned early that expectations were low and attention was scarce. Still, despite the distance and the years of emotional neglect, I wanted them at my wedding. I wanted my father standing beside me. I wanted my mother adjusting my tie and wiping happy tears from her eyes. I wanted, just once, to feel like I belonged. So I addressed their envelope carefully, writing their names slowly, as if neat handwriting could carry the love I never learned how to say aloud. I sealed it, held it in my hands for a moment, and whispered a silent prayer before dropping it into the mailbox. Then I waited. Days passed. Each time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped. Weeks went by, and still nothing came. No call, no message, no acknowledgement. I tried to convince myself they were busy. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Maybe they wanted to respond in person. But deep down, a familiar ache told me not to hope too much. One evening, as I sat beside my fiancée Aisha on the couch, my phone lit up with a message. My chest tightened when I saw my mother's name. I opened it quickly. "We're busy. Weddings are expensive. Don't expect us." That was it. No congratulations. No apology. No love. Just a dismissal, as cold and brief as a stranger declining an invitation. I read the message over and over, as if the words might change. They didn't. Aisha noticed the silence and gently took the phone from my hand. Her expression softened with pain as she read the message. Without saying a word, she wrapped her arms around me. "Maybe they'll change their minds," she whispered softly. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hold on to that fragile thread of hope. But I knew my parents. If they had wanted to come, they would have. That night, long after Aisha had fallen asleep, I remained awake staring at the ceiling. Memories flooded my mind. Birthdays they forgot, school events they missed, achievements they never celebrated. And now, the most important day of my life meant nothing to them. For the first time, I allowed myself to accept a painful truth. I had spent my whole life trying to be seen by people who never really looked at me. The morning of my wedding arrived wrapped in golden sunlight and nervous excitement. The house buzzed with activity, friends moving chairs, cousins laughing loudly, someone arguing over flower arrangements, and the distant rhythm of doll beats echoing through the street. It was the kind of joyful chaos I had seen at countless weddings growing up. But beneath the celebration, there was a quiet emptiness inside me. 2 chairs in the front row remained carefully decorated with white ribbons and small roses, reserved for my parents. I had insisted on keeping them there. "Maybe they'll surprise you," my best friend Hamza had said the night before. I nodded, even though hope had become something fragile and dangerous. As guests arrived, they filled the courtyard with warm greetings and bright smiles. Colleagues from work shook my hand. Old classmates hugged me. Even neighbors I barely knew showed up carrying gifts and blessings. Yet every time the gate opened, my heart lifted, then fell. "Not them. Are your parents on the way?" an uncle asked kindly. "Yes, just delayed," I replied with a practiced smile. I repeated that lie so many times it began to sound real. Inside the dressing room, I adjusted my tie with trembling fingers. I had imagined this moment my entire life. My father standing behind me, offering advice in his deep, steady voice. My mother smoothing my collar and telling me how proud she was. Instead, I faced the mirror alone. Hamza stepped in, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You look ready." I forced a smile. "I guess I am." When the music signaled the start of the ceremony, I stepped outside. The crowd turned toward me, cameras lifted, whispers of admiration spreading through the guests. But my eyes went straight to the empty chairs. They remained untouched. I felt a sharp ache in my chest, but I kept walking. Each step toward the stage felt heavier than the last, not because I doubted my future, but because I was carrying the weight of absence. Then I saw her. Aisha stood beneath the floral canopy, dressed in soft ivory and gold, her eyes shining with emotion. When she looked at me, the noise of the crowd faded. The emptiness softened. The ache loosened its grip. In her gaze, I saw acceptance. In her smile, I found belonging. And in that moment, I understood something profound. Family isn't only who raises you, it's who stands beside you when it matters most. As we exchanged vows, laughter and tears blending in the warm afternoon air, I stopped searching the crowd for the faces that weren't there. Because the person who chose me, truly chose me, was standing right in front of me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. Marriage did not magically erase the struggles we carried into our new life together. In fact, once the music faded and the guests returned home, reality arrived quickly and without ceremony. Aisha and I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment on the third floor of an aging building. The paint peeled near the windows, the plumbing groaned like it was protesting every drop of water, and the summer heat turned the rooms into ovens when the electricity failed. But it was ours. We placed our mismatched furniture carefully, as if arranging luxury pieces. A borrowed sofa sat against the wall. A tiny table served as both dining space and work desk. Our bed touched two walls because the room was too small to center it. Still, every night before sleeping, Aisha would smile and say, "We're building something." And I believed her. Money was tight. My salary barely covered rent, groceries, and utility bills. Unexpected expenses felt like disasters. When our old car broke down again, we pushed it to the mechanic instead of paying for a tow. Some nights we shared one plate of dinner to stretch our budget. Other nights we laughed over instant noodles, pretending they were a special recipe. Yet, despite everything, our home was filled with warmth. We created small rituals, late-night tea on the balcony, whispering our dreams before sleep, planning a future that felt far away, but not impossible. Meanwhile, life continued for my parents as if I didn't exist. Through social media, I saw them attending weddings, celebrating holidays, hosting dinners, smiling in family photos. My brother stood proudly beside my father. My sister posed in elegant outfits beside my mother. There was no empty space where I should have been. They never asked how married life was treating me. They never asked if we needed anything. They never even asked if I was happy. At first, the silence hurt. Then it hardened. That pain slowly transformed into something powerful, fuel. If I was going to be ignored, I would become impossible to overlook. I began staying late at work, volunteering for extra projects no one else wanted. I spent nights learning new skills online, eyes burning from exhaustion, but mind determined to grow. Weekends disappeared into freelance work, small payments slowly building a safety net. Failure was no longer an option, not because I needed to prove something to them, but because I refused to remain the forgotten son. Aisha never complained about the long hours. Instead, she left notes in my bag. "Proud of you." She waited up for me with warm food, even when midnight had long passed. She believed in the future I was fighting to build. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, life began to shift. The struggles were still there, but so was progress. And for the first time, I felt that my life was moving forward, not defined by who had ignored me, but by what I was determined to become. For nearly a year after our wedding, life followed a relentless routine: work, exhaustion, sleep, and repeat. Every day felt like a race against bills that arrived faster than my paycheck. Yet I refused to slow down. I had learned to survive without support, and now I was determined to succeed without it. By day, I worked my regular office job. By night, I transformed into a different version of myself, a freelancer chasing opportunity through a glowing laptop screen in our dim apartment. While the city slept, I studied new software, watched tutorials, and completed small online projects that paid just enough to matter. Some nights, my eyes burned so badly, I had to wash them with cold water just to stay awake. Aisha would wake briefly and whisper, "Come to bed." Soon, I would reply, though we both knew it wouldn't be. Despite the exhaustion, she never complained. Instead, she left cups of tea beside my laptop and little notes that said, "Keep going. We're close." Close to what, I didn't know, but I trusted her faith when mine began to fade. One night, close to 2 a.m., I finished a complex project for an overseas client. It had taken 3 days of nonstop work, revisions, and frustration. I submitted the final file, stretched my aching shoulders, and closed my laptop. My phone buzzed seconds later. I assumed it was a payment notification. Instead, it was an email. The client praised my work, calling it exceptional and far beyond expectations. Then came the line that made me sit upright. They wanted to hire me full-time. Remote position. Flexible hours. Salary. 3 times my current income. I reread the email once. Twice. 5 times. It didn't feel real. My hands trembled as I woke Aisha. "You need to see this," I whispered. She squinted at the screen, then covered her mouth in shock. Within seconds, tears filled her eyes. "This is it," she said softly. "This is the door we've been knocking on." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, the acceptance email was sent. Within months, our lives began to change in ways I had only imagined during sleepless nights. We paid off lingering debts. For the first time, we bought groceries without calculating every rupee. Our savings account slowly grew from zero into something that resembled security. The constant weight on my chest began to lift. We moved into a brighter apartment with working plumbing and windows that welcomed sunlight instead of dust. Aisha bought curtains she loved. I bought a proper desk. Small upgrades that felt like luxuries. For the first time in my life, I felt ahead instead of behind. And yet, through all the progress and quiet victories, one thing remained unchanged. My parents never called, never asked, never noticed. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer waiting to be seen. I was building a life that spoke for itself. Life had begun to feel different, lighter, steadier, filled with a quiet confidence I had never known before. The constant anxiety about bills had faded, replaced by cautious optimism. Aisha and I were no longer surviving day to day. We were planning months ahead. Still, we never forgot where we started. We tracked our spending carefully, celebrated small milestones, and continued living below our means. Even as my new job stabilized our finances, I kept freelancing on the side. Security, I had learned, was something you built slowly, brick by brick. One evening, after finishing work early, Aisha suggested we take a walk through a newly developed commercial district. Bright lights reflected off polished glass buildings, and the sidewalks buzzed with families, young couples, and children chasing each other under the glow of street lamps. It felt like stepping into another world. As we passed a luxury car showroom, something inside me pulled my gaze toward the glass display. There it was. Low, sleek, and impossibly elegant. A black Porsche sat under soft white lighting like a sculpture rather than a machine. Its curves reflected precision and power. The emblem on its hood gleamed with quiet authority. I stopped walking. Aisha took 2 more steps before noticing I wasn't beside her. She turned and followed my gaze, then laughed softly. "You're staring again," she said. "I've never seen one this close," I admitted, my voice almost a whisper. Growing up, cars like that existed only on television screens or in the driveways of people whose lives felt galaxies away from mine. They belonged to executives, celebrities, and businessmen in tailored suits, not to the ignored middle child who once counted coins for bus fare. I stepped closer to the glass, studying the interior, the stitching, the perfect symmetry of the dashboard. One day, I murmured, more to myself than to her. Aisha didn't laugh this time. She slipped her hand into mine and squeezed gently. "Not one day," she said. "Soon." I looked at her, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "This isn't about the car," she continued. "It's about what it represents. You've worked too hard to keep thinking small." Her words settled deep inside me. For years, my dreams had been limited by survival. I wanted stability, security, and dignity, things many people take for granted. Wanting more had felt dangerous, almost arrogant. But standing there beside Aisha, staring at that symbol of achievement, I felt something shift. Maybe success wasn't something reserved for others. Maybe I was allowed to dream bigger. We resumed walking, hand in hand, the glow of the showroom fading behind us. Yet the image of that car remained vivid in my mind, not as a symbol of wealth, but as proof of possibility. That night, as we sat on our balcony sipping tea under a quiet sky, I opened my savings app and studied the numbers. For the first time, a dream that once felt impossible no longer seemed out of reach. And though I didn't say it aloud, I made a silent promise to myself. One day soon, I wouldn't just be looking through the glass. I would be holding the keys. 2 years passed faster than I expected. What started as survival had turned into strategy. My remote job expanded into leadership responsibilities. Investments I cautiously made began producing returns. Freelance clients referred me to bigger contracts. Money no longer slipped through my fingers, it multiplied. But through every raise, every bonus, every milestone, I remembered that night outside the showroom. The promise. I didn't rush the decision. I researched for months, compared models, calculated depreciation, reviewed insurance costs. I wanted the purchase to be smart, not emotional. Still, when I finally walked into the showroom again, my heart was pounding like it had on my wedding day. The sales consultant greeted us politely, unaware of the journey behind our calm expressions. He spoke about engine specs, performance modes, acceleration times. But I wasn't just hearing numbers. I was hearing every ignored birthday, every missed school event, every silent phone call. And I realized something powerful. This moment wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about honoring the version of me who kept going when no one was watching. When the paperwork was placed in front of me, my hands felt steady. $135,000. A number that once would have terrified me. Now it felt like a milestone earned, not borrowed. Aisha squeezed my knee under the desk. "Ready," she whispered. I nodded. I signed. An hour later, the keys were placed in my hand. They were heavier than I expected. When I walked toward the car, my car, sunlight reflected off its flawless black surface. For a brief second, I saw my reflection in the paint. Not the invisible child. Not the rejected son. But a man who built himself. I opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. The leather felt cool and precise. When I pressed the start button, the engine came alive with a deep, controlled roar. Not loud, but confident. Power without needing attention.
It suited me.
As I drove out of the showroom, Aisha recorded the moment on her phone, laughing through tears.
"You did it," she said.
But what she didn't know was that this wasn't about the car. It was about closure. We didn't go to an expensive restaurant to celebrate. Instead, we parked by a roadside tea stall, the same kind of place we used to sit when we couldn't afford more. We ordered 2 cups of chai and leaned against the Porsche, watching the city move around us. No fireworks. No dramatic speeches. Just gratitude. For the struggle. For the growth. For the journey no one else witnessed. That evening, as I parked the car outside our apartment, I realized something ironic. The people who ignored my wedding had no idea that this moment had happened. But soon they would. And not because I planned to tell them. Because success has a way of making noise, even when you don't. I never planned to announce my success. For years, I had learned to move quietly, to work without seeking attention, and to celebrate milestones in private. The journey had been deeply personal, built through sleepless nights, sacrifice, and resilience. I didn't need validation from people who had never asked how I was doing. But that evening, as the sun dipped below the buildings and painted the sky in soft shades of orange, Aisha stood beside the Porsche and smiled.
"Take one photo," she said.
Not to show off, to remember.
So I did.
We stood side by side, the car behind us, both of us smiling in a way that only comes from surviving hard seasons together. No luxury clothes. No dramatic poses. Just gratitude. I posted the photo with a simple caption. Hard work.
Faith.
Gratitude. Then I put my phone away. Within minutes, notifications began pouring in. Friends congratulated me. Colleagues wrote messages of pride. Old classmates I hadn't spoken to in years sent thumbs up and fire emojis. Each message felt warm, genuine, a shared celebration of effort and perseverance. Then my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen and froze. Mother commented, "When did you buy this?" I stared at the words. 3 years of silence, and this was the first question. Before I could process it, another notification appeared. Father sent a message. "Call me." My chest tightened. I hadn't seen his name on my phone since before my wedding. Seconds later, more messages appeared. My brother. Mashallah, big man now. A cousin I barely remembered. Proud of you. When can we visit? An uncle. You've made the family name shine. I sat down slowly, overwhelmed not by joy, but by disbelief. Where were these voices when I got married? Where were they when our car broke down and we walked home in the rain? Where were they when I worked until sunrise just to keep the lights on? Now, suddenly, they had found my number. Aisha watched my expression shift and sat beside me. "They saw the post?" she asked gently. I nodded. She didn't need to ask anything else. We sat in silence as the phone continued vibrating on the table. Part of me felt angry. Another part felt strangely numb. But beneath it all was clarity, sharp and undeniable. Success had made me visible. Not my wedding. Not my struggles. Not my growth.
A car.
I picked up the phone again and reread my father's message. "Call me." The words felt unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone else's life. For years, I had longed for his voice, his approval, his presence. Now that he was reaching out, I didn't feel the urgency I once had. Because something had changed inside me. I was no longer waiting to be noticed. And for the first time, their attention felt less like love, and more like recognition of something they could see and measure. I placed the phone face down on the table. It continued to buzz. But I didn't rush to answer. By the next morning, my phone felt like it belonged to someone else. Messages kept arriving, one after another, each notification lighting up the screen before the previous one faded. Names I hadn't seen in years reappeared as if no time had passed, as if silence had never existed between us. Mother calling, father calling, brother calling. I watched the screen glow, then dim, then glow again. Finally, I answered. My mother's voice burst through the speaker, warm and overly cheerful in a way that felt unfamiliar. "Why didn't you tell us about your success?" she asked. "We had to find out from Facebook." I remained quiet for a moment, unsure how to respond to a question that ignored years of absence. "You never asked," I said calmly. She paused, then quickly continued, as if stepping around the truth. "We are proud of you. Truly proud." Your father couldn't believe it. A second later, my father's voice replaced hers on the call. "You've done well," he said, his tone measured. "Very well. Hard work always pays off." The words sounded rehearsed, like something said to a neighbor rather than a son. Within hours, more calls followed. My brother laughed loudly on the phone.
Mashallah.
"Now you're driving a luxury car. When are you taking me for a ride?" An aunt sent a voice note praising my achievement and reminding me that family should stay connected. A cousin I hadn't heard from since childhood wrote, "We should meet soon. It's been too long." Too long. The phrase echoed in my mind. Where had they been during that time? By afternoon, my mother called again.
"We want to visit," she said.
"It's been so long since we saw you." The request felt sudden, almost urgent. I looked around our apartment. The home Aisha and I had built through patience and sacrifice. Every piece of furniture carried a memory. Every improvement marked a step forward in a journey they had never witnessed. Aisha watched me from across the room, sensing the storm behind my quiet expression. "You don't have to decide right now," she said gently. But I already knew something had shifted. For years, I had wanted this attention. I had imagined my parents showing pride, offering affection, wanting to be part of my life. Now that it was happening, it felt strangely hollow. Not because I hated them, but because their timing revealed something painful. They hadn't returned for me. They had returned for what they could see. That evening, I scrolled through social media again. More relatives had shared my photo. Comments praised my success, my determination, my inspiration. Yet none of those words existed when I was struggling. Success, I realized, has a powerful voice. It attracts people. It creates admiration. It rewrites absence. When my phone rang again, I answered. Yes, I said quietly. You can visit this weekend. After hanging up, I exhaled slowly. Aisha reached for my hand. How do you feel? She asked. I thought carefully before answering. Like they finally found my address, I said. I paused. But they still don't know my story. And deep down, I wasn't sure they ever would. Saturday arrived with a strange heaviness in the air. I woke earlier than usual, not because I was excited, but because my mind refused to rest. The apartment was spotless. Aisha had cleaned the night before, though I knew she wasn't doing it to impress them.
She was doing it for me.
They're your parents, she had said softly. Whatever happens, I'm with you. By noon, my phone buzzed. We're outside. I walked to the balcony and looked down. There they were. My father stood beside their car, adjusting his watch. My mother looked up at the building, then, almost instinctively, her eyes shifted to the Porsche parked in front. Even from above, I could see the change in her expression. A mix of surprise and calculation. I went downstairs alone. For a brief second, we stood facing each other in silence. It had been years since we were this close. You look different, my mother said finally. So do you, I replied politely. My father's gaze moved past me to the Porsche. He walked toward it slowly, running his fingers lightly across the polished surface. This is yours, he asked, though he already knew. Yes. He nodded, trying to hide his amazement. Impressive. No hug. No emotional reunion. Just admiration for the car. We walked upstairs together. When Aisha opened the door, she greeted them warmly, offering tea and snacks. She carried herself with grace, calm, respectful, composed. My mother complimented the furniture.
My father asked about my job.
Both of them looked around carefully, absorbing every detail. You've done well, my father repeated, settling into the sofa. We always knew you would succeed, my mother added quickly. The words hung in the air. Always knew? I remembered the wedding message. We're busy. Don't expect us. But I didn't argue. Instead, I listened. They spoke about relatives who had seen the car online, about how proud the family felt, about how people were talking. It wasn't about my happiness. It wasn't about my marriage. It wasn't even about the years we hadn't spoken. It was about status. At one point, my father cleared his throat. You should visit more often, he said. Family is important. Family. The word felt heavier now. I looked at Aisha in the kitchen doorway. She gave me a small, steady nod, not telling me what to say, just reminding me I wasn't alone. I turned back to my parents. I agree, I said calmly. Family is important. Silence followed. Because we all understood something unspoken. Family isn't just about showing up when the results are visible. It's about standing beside someone when there's nothing to admire yet. After tea, they stood to leave. As we walked downstairs, my father paused beside the Porsche again. This time, he looked at me instead of the car. You've made something of yourself, he said. I held his gaze. Yes, I replied quietly. What I didn't say was, I did it without you. And for the first time in my life, that truth didn't hurt. It empowered me. After my parents left, the apartment felt unusually quiet. The echo of their footsteps faded, leaving behind a strange emptiness. Aisha sat beside me on the couch, her hand resting on mine, sensing the mix of emotions swirling inside me. I looked out the window at the Porsche gleaming under the afternoon sun, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Years of silence, rejection, struggle, and perseverance. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment I had pushed myself when no one else was watching had built this life. When my father paused beside the car before driving away, running his hand over the polished surface, he turned to me and said, You've done well. I nodded politely. A simple acknowledgement. But inside, a storm of thoughts and memories stirred. I wanted to say, you missed it all. The wedding, the hardships, the late nights when we barely had food, the struggle I endured while you were absent. Instead, I stayed silent. Aisha leaned her head on my shoulder. Are you okay? She asked softly. I took a deep breath and let my gaze wander over the home we had created together. The apartment, the furniture, the quiet corner where we celebrated small victories, the balcony where we had dreamed about the future. All of it spoke louder than my parents ever could. I realized something profound. I no longer needed their validation, their sudden attention, their compliments, even their desire to reconnect. None of it could rewrite the years of absence. Their focus had shifted only because success is visible, loud, and tangible. They noticed the Porsche. They noticed the apartment. They noticed the image I had built. But they never saw the journey, the struggles, the heartbreak, the moments of doubt and perseverance that had made me who I am today. And that was their loss, not mine. I turned to Aisha and smiled, a genuine, content smile. We did this together, I said quietly. She squeezed my hand and rested her head against mine.
Yes.
And we'll keep building. For the first time in years, I felt complete. Not because my parents had finally noticed me, but because I had proven something to myself. I had survived. I had grown. I had succeeded on my own terms. The Porsche sat outside, a symbol of achievement, but it wasn't the most important part. The most important part was this: a life built with love, determination, and resilience, a life that no absence, no neglect, and no belated attention could ever diminish. As evenings settled over the city, I realized I had finally stopped chasing approval that would never come. My parents had remembered I existed when they saw success, but I had already remembered myself long ago. And that made all the difference.